Hello summoners and welcome back to another ProGuides video. My name is Nathan Ng and today's topic is the worst 10 champions on patch 10.23. But before that, today's question of the day is, what do you think is currently the worst item in the game? Let us know what you think in the comments down below. And one last thing, we have a new channel dedicated to the Wild Rift, so if you're about mobile gaming, I'm not going to judge you for it, but make sure you check it out so you can stay up to date on the mobile version of the game that we know that you love. I think. We don't really know that. Anyway, now without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into the video. Starting things off in the top lane, Tryndamere has been one of the hardest hit champs in the preseason. Previously a frequent visitor to our top list, he's now here on the flip side of things. He's been taking the new items pretty badly, with most players struggling to find what really works, and most of the bruisers and tanks that are already good at using the new items just messing him up. Without pulling off the classic smack enemy level 1 and then using Ignite for a cheese kill, you'll quickly find yourself falling behind and getting outscaled by more meta picks like Fiora or Shen. And when you're playing Tryndamere, you can only really rely on splitting to win, since you provide almost nothing to teamfights unless you're super ahead. But since we already said those other split pushers are pretty much going to beat you in all stages of the game, you're basically a super minion, with crit. Yeah, if you're alone, you can probably take the towers in the side lane, but honestly, who can? YONE as a champion is pretty strong, and he can carry fights once you master the champ, but that's only really when you're playing him mid lane. When you try to take him top, he simply doesn't have any good matchups. Pretty much every bruiser will just bully you out of lane, and even hyper-scaling champions like Fiora or Jax will just dumpster you in the early game. And when it comes to splitting against those monsters later, you don't really stand a chance. Tanks will easily beat you out by itemizing against you, and you will serve as a more useful pick for their team. They're able to hold you down if not outright kill you in the side lane, while also providing engage to force fights. While he isn't also great in the top lane, Yasuo's stronger early game gives him a little bit more wiggle room if you want a champion with a somewhat similar identity. If you're dead set on playing YONE, at least swap to the mid lane where, like I mentioned earlier, he can lane more comfortably and scale to the teamfight monster that he becomes later in the points of the game. One thing to note is YONE is one of those champions with a pretty high mastery curve. That basically means that he has a low win rate, but once you're good at him, your own win rate on the champion will go way up. If you want to spend less time learning by grinding your face into the wall that is solo queue, head over to ProGuides.com and one of our challenger coaches will be more than happy to help you carry your games in no time, by teaching you, of course. GRAGAS is a champion that is constantly in and out of the revolving door of meta picks, and right now he is definitely on the downswing, or he's just way outside in this metaphor. While he does have a healthy clear, it's slow, and he gets completely abused by the other meta picks like Hecarim, Nunu, and Kayn that can clear at double his speed and have stronger scaling as the game goes on. The only really good thing that GRAGAS has going for him are his early ganks, but again, other champions just do it better. Why rely on GRAGAS E plus flash combo when Zac can just gank practically off screen? Is much tankier, disrupts with more CC, and honestly even does more damage since he lives so long, all the while soaking up a ton of damage for his own team as a tank. Aside from ganking power, if you're looking for AP carries, you have champs like Elise for early pressure, Evelynn for a scaling assassin with a massive carry potential, or a Mumu who is kind of being slept on but is completely broken at the moment. With a lot of other picks on this list, you could argue that if you really like the champ, you could maybe make it work. Just maybe. But with SYLAS jungle, that's not the case. His win rate in this role is sitting around 39%, and there's just no saving that. His clear is incredibly slow and leaves him kinda low, making him super easy to invade. His ganks are lackluster, with his only CC being a short range chain, and his dueling is just bad compared to other junglers, and he just falls so behind so fast that he's completely worthless. Like GRAGAS, there are so many better options all around for AP picks, and SYLAS jungle is probably the worst possible thing that you could do to your team. Well, maybe there's one thing worse that we'll be covering later. If you really want to play him, just go with the norm and play him mid. Speaking of mid lane, we're going to be talking about our first pick, which is RYZE. While RYZE was formerly one of the best picks in pro play and high elo, he's just not it now. Even at the highest levels where most players can use their wave management to reliably scale into a strong mid to late game hyper carry, he's doing subpar. Anything under that and he's just awful. There are a few things that you can chalk this up to. For one, other hard scaling champions with some type of early game usefulness. For example, Orianna comes with early game lane bullying and has a nice power curve that scales perfectly into team fights, while Kayle has at least her ultimate to throw on her teammates that are able to carry the early and mid game fights. But with RYZE, he's either strong enough to partake in fights or he's not. One good thing that RYZE does have early is his CC, with his EW that has a guaranteed root and can usually lead to a cheesy gank and resulting kills. But the problem with that is that if you're going to pick up the champ with a guaranteed point and click CC, there are better options that could lead the snowball even harder. Take Annie for example. With her burst mage identity and easy landing abilities, she can take an early lead from just first blood and run with it to carry a game. they just might have to rework RYZE again, and not because he's doing weak or is not performing as well as they'd like, but because they love reworking the guy. Sort of like Tryndamere earlier in the video, KASSADIN went from front of the pack to bottom of the totem pole, and he did this pretty much overnight with the coming of this preseason. None of his good matchups are really played at the moment, and the new items just don't fit him. And when you're playing a champion that is supposed to scale to 3 or 4 items before becoming strong, you really want the items that fit his scaling narrative. So when a champ gives up all lane priority but can't really teamfight until later, and even then just kinda sucks at their job, there are just better options to go with. While I'm not saying he's a carbon copy, if you want a super mobile slippery champion, consider Fizz. His E gives him a ton of outplay potential, and once you get enough CDR, it actually has a Riftwalk-esque feel to it. If you want a more in-depth guide on champions like Fizz, we have some of that resource at ProGuides.com. Make sure you check that out. Now looking at some bot lane picks, we'll start off with VARUS. Both his lethality and on-hit hyper carry builds made him a lane bully that could win lane and just carry hard in the mid and late game in the past. But now, neither build really does much for him. In fact, he's doing so bad that at Worlds, not a single team picked him at any stage of the tournament. For a champion that has historically been so dominant in pro play, that's a pretty telling sign that he's not doing so great. In solo queue, if you want to play a lane bully, Draven is a great option. His strong trading power pairs super well with the kill lane support, and just a single kill can result in a snowball effect that sees you carrying the game. If you want to lean towards a stronger scaling on-hit champion, Kai'Sa is a much better fit, and she offers so much more flexible range of options for itemization, able to suit the needs of different games. Our next marksman is Sivir, and she's just sort of falling flat lately. One thing to bear in mind is that with the bot lane carries is that their range of win rates is much smaller than other roles, since most marksmen have a somewhat similar style of gameplay regardless of the kit, at least to some degree. So in this case, Sivir is sitting around a 48% win rate, while SYLAS jungle is at 39%. Obviously, SYLAS is horrible, and Sivir isn't bad to that extreme. Instead, she's just something that doesn't really excel at anything. Sivir traditionally has been useful for her ultimate's ability to enable her team to force fights, and her strong wave clear that lets her soak up a ton of farm and transition that to a late game hyper carry. But she lacks synergy with these new items, or at least a couple people haven't found what's OP on her, and it shows. Compare her to Ashe and Jhin. While they don't really offer the same movement speed for the entire team, both champions come packed with their own utility, and they offer a ton of damage, all the while being dominant in the early game. If you watched the series before, you know what to expect here. Top KENCH support is literally the worst pick in solo queue possible. And it's not just about his win rate. Having to lane with top KENCH as your partner feels absolutely miserable. He provides close to no pressure, and the pros only pick him and make it work due to their coordination. I promise, in solo queue, your ADC would much rather buy their own QSS and let you pick a more useful champion that can either buff them up, engage fights, or just poke down the enemy and win lane that way. You won't get much use out of his ultimate in solo queue, and outside of lane, you won't have the coordination needed to make the absolute most out of his W. And if the enemy never actually targets your ADC, you just sort of sit there like a bump on a log. Compare that to any other support. Lulu, for example, can peel with both her polymorph and ultimate, and on top of that, offers a huge buff to her carry's damage output, making her useful even when they aren't being dove. While she may traditionally be an ADC, plenty of people still try to make MF work as a support, and they need to stop. While she does offer some good poke in lane with her E, that's really all she offers, all game. Every other poke type of support does more consistently, and out of the lane they offer more utility and damage in fights. Zyra has her root, huge DPS with her plants, and her ultimate knocks up everyone in the area. Vel'Koz offers huge amounts of damage, slows, and even has a knockup. But as a support, Misfortune really just comes with her E's damage and slow and her ultimate, and those two abilities aren't quite enough to make her work. Even winning bot lane, MF support will fall off hard, and the game will become a 4v5 by the time the mid game rolls around. So look for better options like the ones we just talked about before.
And that wraps things up for the worst 10 champions on 10.23. But remember, the #1 factor when it comes to playing a champ is your own enjoyment. So don't feel like you have to give up your main just because it's on the list. Unless you're a meta slave, then I won't stop you. And don't forget to let us know what item you think is the very worst in the game down in the comments below. And make sure you check out our website for more in-depth content on guides that were made from your favorite pro players and streamers. So for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.